Отже, доброго ранку, колеги, друзі, всі, хто цікавиться темою інформації, когнітивних війн, спростуванням фейків і захисту загалом демократії. Сьогодні ми вас вітаємо на заході демократії під прицілом, як Україна, США, Тайвань захищають інформаційний простір. Я Олена Трегуб, очільниця Незалежної антикорупційної комісії. Ми, по суті, є антикорупційною організацією України, яка працює передусім в секторі національної безпеки. І тому, в принципі, це природний процес, що нас зацікавила ця тема, тому що уже тривалий час, особливо з початком повномасштабного вторгнення, ми займаємося міжнародною адвокацією, комунікацією, є голосом громадянського суспільства України у світі, а з іншого боку, звичайно, ми фокусуємося на розслідуваннях антикорупційних, на тому, щоб наша українська система ставала більш чесною, прозорою, підзвітною. І тому виникло таке питання, що у світі ми часто почали бачити багато дезінформації, багато наративів, які спрямовані були на підрив підтримки України. Вони були тим більше пов'язані з нашою темою, з корупцією, і часто вони абсолютно були неправдивими. І тому ми зрозуміли, звичайно, що тема корупції, вона взагалі відіграє величезну роль в цій когнітивній війні, яка відбувається зараз у світі, умовно кажучи, між демократіями і автократіями, між Росією і Україною. І також ми зрозуміли, що нам є багато чим поділитися досвідом як українцям. І нам також цікаво почути, як працюють наші колеги зі Сходу, з Заходу. Тому на цьому заході ми так побудувати вирішили розмову, щоб
currently work in the United States, in the EU, in the East, in Taiwan, to hear about their experience, and then we're having our experts in this studio who deal with this topic in Ukraine, and in Ukraine we have a lot to tell, because I think that generally Ukraine has proved that if our narrative, the narrative of democracy, freedom, the defense of our homeland has won, if there is a cognitive victory, misinformation and fakes are not so frightening anymore, because the outlook of our people is stable. The essence of it is the necessity to defend our country. Russia and Russian world doesn't bring anything good. And despite any psyops that are taking place during the war, our population is resistant, and it's interesting to hear about the experience of our colleagues. So let me start with Ivana Stradner. I don't know whether she's joining us online.
Я, до речі, забула сказати, що, шановні гості...
Yeah, I forgot to mention, dear guests, those who join us both online and offline, there is simultaneous interpretation into English and Ukrainian. However, our activity is bilingual, and I will be mostly talking Ukrainian. But Ivana, do you understand me when I speak Ukrainian? Or do you have translation?
But it's better, I understand. Of course. It's very good to hear that you understand. Ivana is an expert who works at their Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and she works specifically on our transatlantic community. She's currently in Europe, but she works in the US. And I wanted to start actually our conversation with the West and then move to the East. So, Ivana, like, what's going on right now in the field of fighting disinformation and cognitive warfare when it comes to European Union, United States? In particular, we know that there was this decision of the United States to stop agreement on cooperation on disinformation with the European Union. Why did it happen, and what are the implications? Where are we heading, in your opinion? If you can do like 5, 6 minutes, 7 minutes would be great.
Absolutely. I think many people in the West are finally realizing that information is a weapon for Russia. And given that Russian military doctrine pertains to basically who has information superiority is going to win this war, we really have to understand how the Kremlin thinks. Russia, as an autocratic country, is free to wage information war against the West without relying on any rules, which gives Putin an advantage to challenge the West. Russia doesn't have to really send tanks and jets to any of the Western capitals, even though we just saw the drone incursion, which is part of Russian hybrid warfare. But all Putin really has to do, and wants to do, and can do, is to further polarize the countries using propaganda and information operations writ large. And that's precisely why the West is waking up to this threat. Elena, you're absolutely right. The United States abandoned a very important tool for fighting information warfare, including the Voice of America, including shutting down, some of the agreements that we had with Europe, and this is really not helping. And I'm very concerned about that because on the one side, the reason why the United States is doing that, it's because of, in large part because of 2016 elections, but also because there is a thing that is called in the US free speech. And it's one of the most important things in the United States. It is truly the cornerstone of our democracy. The problem is that there is one thing that is free speech, such as different actors can say whatever they want on social media, and that should be absolutely allowed. The problem is when those actors, or some actors, are working on behalf of countries such as Russia or China. And that's not free speech. That's called information operations, which is part of a national security problem. And I truly, truly hope within the coming months that the United States is going to change its policy on this issue. There is always gloom and doom scenario that people are talking in the West. I'm much more hopeful that things are going to shift in Washington when it comes to influence operations, especially given that Russia and China, they have different goals, but they are actually changing a lot, exchanging their knowledge about this. And we already see a lot of coordinating campaigns. Just look at the latest Shanghai conference and things that they signed, Russia and China. Just look at the BRICS and different information security agreements that they have in common. So we have to change certain things. When it comes to the EU has done a great work when it comes to debunking and exposing Russian propaganda. The problem is that the best defense in the information space is offense. And the problem is that the EU, that is compiled with democracies, they cannot spread influence operations by spreading lies. And while we have to definitely, confront a certain moral compass in the West, the problem is that this battlefield in information space requires a lot of stepping outside of your comfort zone and doing some uncomfortable things. And will, unfortunately, in politics, risk aversion pays off. That's how you advance in your career. And having said that, in information environment, you cannot be risk averse. You have to be risk tolerant. You have to take certain risks. And I do not see that the EU in particular, for example, is moving in that direction, because exposing Russian lies is really not enough. We have to put Russia on the defensive, so they spend time managing resources defending themselves, which leads me to the third pillar, which is NATO. And I think NATO is really waking up seriously to this threat. They are building their cognitive warfare strategy. There are a lot of efforts when it comes to hybrid warfare, that they're rethinking things when it comes to also influence operations. So I'm very positive and optimistic about the future of NATO's cognitive warfare in this environment, because for example, what happened just a few days ago with Poland or Estonia or Romania, that was a wonderful opportunity also for Russia to use hybrid warfare activities that are accompanied by influence operations that were not targeting only the West, but also the global South, to, expose how the West is weak. And my question is, where was the West? Why the West didn't use influence operations to expose what I like to call Russian mini NATO, called CSTO, that is falling apart? We do not have to spread lies. All we had to do is really to show how Russia is not a reliable ally. They threw Armenia under the bus. They were not there for them. Armenia is not very happy with the CSTO. So that's just one of the examples how we can be creative to launch our influence operations to spread the truth about Russian weakness. And as I mentioned, that's one of the problems in the West, why as a democracy it's very, very hard to win this war. And speaking of winning, let's also abandon even that word. Are we winning or are we losing? Because that's literally the question that I get for every single event. We have to rethink this thing. Influence operations are part of what I like to call a protracted war. It's a long-term continuum. You do not win or lose this war. You can have information superiority on a day one to lose it on a day two. And that's exactly how we have to rethink our thinking, whether we are losing or winning, to think about small increments of winning in the long run. Which leads me to my final point. We also need to have a strategy. This is not some hodgepodge on social media. Russia is spending $2 billion on influence operations. It's not only about bots and trolls on social media. They're leveraging social media influencers across the globe. They're flying them to Russia, giving them training and bringing them back to their countries to spread certain narratives. So Russia has a very, very clear strategy about that. And that's something that we also need to rethink as a system, how to change. Because this war in Ukraine, it's not only about Ukraine. This is truly about challenging the global order. And B, how do you create a global order? In perception. And that's exactly what Russia and China are pushing together to create what I like to call a multipolar world. And with all due respect, people in the West are laughing about this concept, thinking, that Russia has economy of a Texas. Well, that can be true, but it doesn't matter, because perception matters. Think about how NATO was created, first in the perception. And that's exactly why Russia and China are working together to leverage places such as BRICS, Shanghai Conference, or other places to create what I like to call a multipolar world. And that's precisely, this battlefield is a cognitive battlefield about the perception. Who has perception superiority is going to win this war. And I truly hope that in the coming months, both the EU and NATO, as well as the United States, are going to shift their strategy towards this.
Thank you, Ivana. That's actually excellent beginning for our discussion, because we hear your message that the West is on the defense, and not on the offense, and it doesn't sound from your presentation that the West is currently winning, even though you don't want to speak about winning and losing. And now we need to move to the east and hear our experts from Taiwan. How do they see? Ivana just presented us what's happening in the West, and Taiwan, it's a country in the East, which is on many levels is a Western society. So Min Seon Woo, he is the co-founder of the Doublethink lab in Taiwan, and his think tank does a lot of research on how Taiwan becomes the victim of disinformation, or how the world becomes the victim of disinformation about Taiwan. So, Mina, I would like to address you. Could you tell us, could you react on Ivana's framework, which she set, and about the current environment, and what do you see happening in your country when it comes to Chinese influence in particular?
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you for having me. We're doing this Chinese information operation research as well as their influence operation for 6 years here, and we connected with a lot of partners around the world. Recently, we just had another report came out from our China Index, which is cover the 101 countries around the world for overall Chinese influence operation. It's a more complex for their United Front work, particularly tactic around the world. And we see, for instance, just in Europe, we see that German and the UK still #1 and #2 since 2022. But also we have Serbia and following a lot of different countries. They have different strategies. Not everyone, not particularly from the media. Some countries they have more technology cooperation or foreign policy alignment rather than media, but they do have a lot of effort to push the media. But also we are happy to see that the Ukrainian is one of the most decliner from 2022 to 2024 in terms of the Chinese influence. We also start to do a lot of this comparison, try to understand what's different Chinese information operation, their targeting warfare, what's the different or what's the similar with the Russia one since the full-scale war happened in 2022. And shockingly, we found not only they have a lot of this media agreement, so they do a lot of Chinese do have a lot of effort to help Russia on the state media level. They will translate a lot of Russian today's news, anything that targeting Ukraine or Western countries or undermine NATO will be automatically translated to Chinese information space and try to undermine the Ukrainian resilience or Ukrainian democracy in any kind of a way. But it's not only just translate the news, but we also doing our research. We also see a lot of effort be actually put into there's an automation bots or bots farm or all kind of this information operation effort that really costs money to fabric a lot of this disinformation or propaganda campaign into the Chinese community or overseas Chinese community or inside China or to Taiwan. So we actually see that they are spending money on that, and start from the war what's actually happened, and all the way to biolab conspiracy theory, and then the new geopolitical conflict, right? So I also want to say that mention that when we had this exchange with our Ukrainian partners, we also learned that there's some tactics are very, very similar and exactly the same. For instance, like in Taiwan, 2008, we have this like a Taiwanese businessman. He had a huge business in China, and he came back suddenly one day and become the media owner. He bought 3 media organizations: one TV news, one print media, and another one is radio. And slowly it turned it to China propaganda machine and the mouthpiece. And because it's an existing media organization in Taiwan, you cannot shut him down by foreign media regulation, right? So, China's state media cannot legally operate in Taiwan. So they use this way to infiltrate their message into Taiwanese society. And we also learned that this is a similar tactic as Russia has to apply to Ukraine 2014. This is not only the narrative or the content or how they actually operate or amplify those narratives, but also on the tactic side, they are consistently exchanged and then learning from each other. To Taiwan, there's a state media to media cooperation, content farm, or a lot of the commenters, what we call you can say cyber troop or local agents, right? So they contacted the local influencers through a lot of media marketing firm, and they are profit-driven actors. They are profit-driven actors, for profit. For instance, there's a marketing firm that will distribute this task to random Taiwanese TikToker and ask them to say some like a script or even the act and to promote certain propaganda or rumor or try to divide our society. And if you would look at the polling, it's actually pay off, right? So the polling shows, for instance, like in the last year, before our general election, we saw the polling that there's almost a half of the KMT, which is a major opposition party, their supporter actually believe U.S. should be responsible for the Ukrainian war. And along with a lot of the U.S. skepticism that U.S. is not going to help Taiwan, or even when it comes to like our government is that no different than a dictatorship, Taiwan has no freedom of expression. Those KMT supporter, along with another third party, they have an overwhelming 70% or 80% of a supporting rate to those narrative, those deep narratives, right? So I think that there's a real effective. So it's come to a lot of a question that I don't know if you you pick up this news that in the New York Times reviewed this company from China. It's called Galaxy. They created this like 1,000 of the AI persona for Taiwanese people, for U.S. politicians, and then they can use the AI to generate the certain narrative that is tailored for those personas and the users. They try to, scrapping a lot of this data from your social media, understand your political ideology, and they tailor the message to you. This is our adversary is doing. They are adopting the new emerged technology. And in our defense side, we actually don't have any tools, right? So, for instance, if the Galaxy is a Taiwanese company, it's actually legal. Can you believe that? How that could be legal, right? So let's come to the question is that I think not only Taiwan, but also the EU, is that whether we do believe this FIMI, foreign information manipulation or cognitive warfare, do we actually believe it's a harmful activities? If we do, then we should have a policy, regulation. We should have a series of action to contain the harm, to limit their scope. Not like right now, if we have a lot of this like Chinese ad they are recruiting the young people to have the free trip or join this like influencer training to China. So they pay you travel to China and they teach you how to become a TikTok influencers, right? So this and they come back and with a lot of this like support with the traffic or with the resource. My question, or a lot of it, like I said, those content farm, they receive their clients' money and then look at for the Taiwanese TikToker to distribute or amplify those narrative and content. Our question is that how that could be legal or possible become a market or industry. And this is something we should really looking at and try to find a way to stop. I also want to echo the previous speakers, Ivana's point is that we also need to look into that our adversary, how much money they put into this cognitive warfare information operation as a weapon for gray zone tactic. Because if you really think about that, then you will find that how little we are even combined together as a defense to those our adversaries to counter those measures. So I will stop here and looking forward for our conversation.
Thank you very much. So basically very concerning since you agree that we are on the defense and they are on the offense. And what was most funny for me is that Ivana said that Russia is inviting influencers to Russia and then they come back and spread the disinformation, and China is inviting influencers to China. So here we see one more similarity. І зараз я перейду до нашого, власне,
And now I will proceed to one of our Ukrainian investigators who is staying in Taiwan, Yurii Poita, who was invited by the Taiwanese Institute of Defense Research Studies, and we've heard that the previous panelist, Mr. Min, said that it turns out not even Taiwan that has immunity against misinformation, and anti-Ukrainian propaganda penetrates the Taiwanese society. And hence the question to you, like you're studying this anti-Ukrainian misinformation in Chinese social media. What are the trends? What has changed? And is it intensifying or waning? It would be interesting to hear what's the situation for the time being. Thanks a lot. Good morning. Let me switch to English because our study was made in English language.
Let me express my gratitude for the opportunity to take part in this discussion. It's definitely a huge pleasure and honor for me to share my observation and also to learn from you. So I will be focusing mostly on the Chinese disinformation and Chinese propaganda against Ukraine in Chinese social media. And actually, from my point of view, this is very interesting and very important because very often this is a very hidden page. So this is the missing puzzle. So because many people basically they pay attention to what China is talking in their traditional media, what Russia is talking about in their traditional media, and how their narratives are coincide or different. And I absolutely agree with Ivana that Russia and China are cooperating together. But when it comes to the social media, and especially Chinese-speaking social media that are aimed at Chinese-speaking audience, this evidence of cooperation between Russia and China, I think, very much clear. And there are much more indicators that they are very actively working together in order to undermine actually Ukrainian resistance. So when you look into Chinese social media, and we are now conducting research on this matter, analyzing what Chinese social media and their public opinion leaders of their public opinions in Weibo. Weibo, this is analog of Facebook, in China. What they are talking about Ukraine, Russian-Ukraine war, about Russia, about so-called peace negotiation, about ceasefire, etc. And the results are very, very, very much interesting. And with cooperation with Doublethink Club, with their kind support and their providing of data, what is going on in Chinese social media, we are trying to analyze the picture there. And so we are analyzing the situation on the weekly basis. So every week we are looking at what is going on there. So we do have data about 20 pages. Every report of the week is about 200 pages of every single week. And we are trying to analyze it and to write a short report, short analysis, research on this matter, up to a few dozens of pages. What we found out there, it's very striking, I would say, and very different from what is going on in traditional media. So first of all, what we see that the Chinese narratives and Chinese language, Chinese propaganda and disinformation against Ukraine in their social media are much more extreme comparing with traditional media. When you look at traditional media, Chinese traditional media, of course we do understand that they are biased, but still they are more or less, or they are pretending be neutral. They say that Ukraine is a victim of the war, that NATO is guilty of this war, that only method to resolve this conflict is peace negotiation, and Ukraine shouldn't be provided weapons by Western countries, etc., and stuff like that. But when you look at the Chinese accounts, and we analyzed actually the leader of public opinion in China, they do have more than 1 million subscribers. There are few millions of them, and we do observe the very coordinated campaign. So what they are doing there? So first of all, they are attacking Ukrainian political and military leadership. They say that Ukraine doesn't need and doesn't want peace. Ukraine government doesn't want peace at all. That Zelensky personally trying to undermine any peace agreement, any peace negotiation, any peace initiatives, because Zelensky doesn't want ceasefire because it will be election, and then if he won't be elected again, then he will be killed by its own people. Then Chinese social media say that Zelensky many times already betrayed Ukraine, and other stories like that. Then Chinese social media attacking Ukrainian armed forces. They said that Ukrainian army sent their people just in a meat grinder, and then the Ukrainian army is penetrated by Nazi propaganda, and then even Ukrainian army even took women, Russian women in Kursk as a hostages and took them for about a few months. And Ukraine intentionally attacking civilian object in Russia, and Ukraine strikes against nuclear plant and stuff like that. Then very huge campaign, information campaign against Ukrainian mobilization. So they are trying to undermine Ukrainian mobilization and trying to portray Ukrainian mobilization center as a Nazi that are catching people in the street and then sending them to the flame of the war. And Ukrainian people must resist. Ukrainian people must choose life rather than death. And this is very interesting, because how can we imagine that Chinese social media are paying attention to this very, very specific issue? Then they say that Ukraine doesn't want to exchange wounded people or killed people because Ukraine doesn't want to pay a compensation for those families, for those people who were killed on the battlefield or who were wounded on the battlefield. And this way, China portrays Ukraine as an inhumane country that doesn't respect even its own people. And also there are many stories about justification of Russian action, and then that Ukraine is a terrorist state because Ukraine is attacking Russia in in the depth of the territory and against some strategic object, etc. So there are many different stories about this, and we see the intensification of this information campaign. Then, interestingly, when you look at the source of this information, we do observe that Chinese accounts, they take information from Russian sources, from Russian media, from Russian politicians, but at the same time, they build up, they make this information and publication itself. There are many posts, there are many publications that actually originally not from Chinese sources. So it seems that China also tries to publish, to make this publication itself. And the language they use is very aggressive against Ukraine. They use Nazi statements or something related to fascism or something like that. Then they very often use hate speech against Ukraine, and this is very interesting because we cannot see it in Chinese traditional media. So, and the last point here is that we don't believe that it's just kind of something exceptional. We believe that this is coordinated campaign because we do observe hundreds of this account in Chinese social media, and that their narratives and their time is very much coordinated with Russian accounts, with Russian propaganda, with Russian disinformation, etc. So the question that we still don't know how to answer: what is the reason for Chinese government to portray Ukraine this way, in very inhumane and very extreme way for their audience? Thank you very much.
Дякую, Юрій.
Thank you, Mr. Yurii. Well, really, all those topics that you've mentioned, I would say they are universal narratives spread all over the world, and it's clear that the source of those narratives, of those viruses, is Russia. But what's interesting, NAKO works in Indian media space, and all of the narratives that you've mentioned, well, probably there was the last change in Indian media space. They were always saying that Ukraine is a U.S. marionette. Then after the Oval Office showdown, their picture was broken and they didn't know what to say, and they started doubting that Ukraine was a U.S. marionette. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left. We only have 20 minutes. And I would like to proceed to our Ukrainian guests. Well, you've heard it all. You understand all of the challenges. So how does Ukraine cope with that? How do we counteract? Tetiana, let me ask you first, just in brief, during the period of the full-scale invasion and since the beginning of the war, since 2014, well, how did our topic, I mean, you're a prominent anti-corruption investigator, what were the trends that you were observing? How was the corruption topic used in misinformation campaigns against Ukraine? And did it prove to be efficient? Well, good morning, everyone. Let me explain this story. Well, what Russia was trying to do was like using our real corruption scandals to intensify their perspective, like there's something so large scale that is incomparable with any other country. They were trying to prove that Ukraine is like an ultra corrupted country which is not worth supporting. Well, basically we were meeting our colleagues in EU. Also, I was visiting the American senators in the United States, American congressmen, and there was American think tank who they were telling me, like, you have to do something with this extra intensified image of corruption in Ukraine. Well, corruption does exist, but you have to explain that Russia is playing on this topic, overheating it. Well, what was the most unpleasant for us during the activity of Anti-Corruption Council and what Victoria's parts, so to say, supported us with is she was saying that Ukraine trades in weapons that were provided to us for free, and I've heard that question even from the neighbors in my village, like they were saying, Tetiana, do we really sell it, and are we really embezzling it? And I had to explain, no, we don't do that, just for one simple reason. Those weapons are not even sufficient for us. It would be shooting our, not even a leg, but shooting us in the head if we sell those weapons. So I was really happy, like, to visit this United States Department of State, and I was asked no question about embezzlement of the military material or military aid. But this narrative does exist, and it already erodes the minds of the people, just like the narrative of Nazis in Azov. Me and my colleague Victoria, we had to explain once again during our last visit to US what is Azov, what is their ideology, how do they work, well, how distorted was that image by Russian Federation. And let me share my personal experience that has nothing to do with corruption, but I've been living for 1 month in occupation side by side with the Russian troops, and I had to talk to those people on a daily basis. And one thing is when you read about the chipped pigeons who spread the coronavirus, when you read about it, or the NATO bases located in Ukraine. And a whole different thing is when you have 12 people with rifles coming to your house and trying to convince you on those about those very same facts. So during that month, I was absolutely convinced. I mean, I don't know how successful was Russia in terms of brainwashing the people all around the world, but they have the whole army of the brainwashed people on their part, and they just think in terms of what was fed to them by their propaganda, like they come to Ukraine to liberate Ukrainian people, God knows from what, and God knows what is going on in Ukraine. Well, thank you, Tetiana. It's becoming more and more concerted, but let's hear to some success stories. Yevhen, like you're the editor-in-chief of a new media, of United 24 Media. Well, basically, we can say that you have a success story when you can make the voice of Ukraine heard all around the world. Can you share something positive?
Yevgeny Slavnyi. I'm from United 24 Media. So we can skip the video because we don't have that much time, and most of people here are like in the topic, so I'll skip some parts. How do I move the slide? Like this? Okay, perfect. So I'll skip the video. Yeah, as you already mentioned, Russian disinformation is one of the main topics is polarization tool. Here's the one of the older examples. Now we saw Reform UK movement in United Kingdom, which was also funded by Russia and funded by China. Like when the war started, we saw that like everybody in the world understands the danger of Russian disinformation, but at some point we understood that it's pretty lame to wait for the government and big organizations to react to it, because you can see that Meta banned Russian state media, Russia Today, in like 1 year ago in 2024. So we understood that it's much more effective to produce our own content and produce our own truthful narrative. So what we do in United 24 Media, we understand why people use social media and be better at responding to their needs. We understand what social media platforms people use, and don't leave them alone there. And we make our own truthful narrative stronger and more robust. Because as Ivana stated in the start, that it's much harder to debunk and counter things, that it's much more effective to produce them and have your own informational actors in the discourse. The thing that means a lot is main reasons for using social media. News, I suppose, is only on like 8th place, so most of time people are not going to social media to check the news. That's why you need to represent your truthful narratives in every other direction, because everything is news now and everything is content now. That's why you need to be presented in every sphere. Also, we see a huge trend. Obviously, it's more users of the internet and it's growing every day. And more people are using social media. Now it's like 5.3 billion people all over the world, and they're all our audience, and they're also all audience for our axis of evil. So we created our own media. We have 75 million of unique accounts per month, mostly coming from Western hemisphere, I would say, but also we ridiculously have some Chinese traffic and Indian traffic from time to time. This is our digital ecosystem. That's like point 2, that you need to be represented from like my third slide, that you need to be represented in every other social media platform, because if you're not there, Russia is obviously there, and they will be producing their own, spreading their own narratives. Obviously, and like it means a lot that you have completely separate different teams for every other social media, because if like, I know, traditional media, and why I suppose traditional media is losing audience for the last 10-15 years, is because they were like, print and television, standard classical journalism, which I respect a lot. And when the social media was created, they were like, okay, let's hire some younger guys and they will adapt our smart and long materials. And they are not that successful. I suppose like last 3 years, big media like New York Times is pretty successful, but still we can see that huge blooming of branded influencers and branded content, smaller media, and so on. So we have like separate teams, and they produce, like we have, just for you to understand how we work, we have editorial meeting once per week, and we discuss the directions which we want to push, and then every other team creates something completely different for their platform. It's not like we're writing big article for the website. Sometimes they use it, sometimes they do something on their own. What algorithm is unfortunately a huge thing, and you can do nothing with it. So we need to produce reactive and trending content which drives the audience, and it's like something awful that happens, like all this rocket attacks on Ukraine bring us huge amount of traffic. Also producing something sometimes ridiculous, like I know, dancing soldiers and soldiers saving kittens and all that. It might not look like a serious journalism, but it's something that actually drives the algorithm, and then it pushes educational content, which can affect some people, value-based content, which has an emotion with it and has this link of the emotional link with your brand, and for us, it's brand is Ukraine. And call to action, sometimes we like produce effective campaigns. It's not in this presentation, but we have few cases of pretty effective cancel campaigns with Olympic Committee, with Russian Olympic sportsmen, and so on. What we do, we create campaigns, and we have campaign like smaller informational campaigns every other month, like focusing on some things. We produce content for it, and also what's cool, because of this slide, we have pretty powerful distribution channels, because a lot of media are like doing amazing content, and most, even like not media but NGOs like you, researchers, you have amazing information and amazing reports, but you don't know how to pack it into content which people will see, and you don't have distribution platforms, because it's also something pretty hard to create. And coming here, yeah, one of the latest cases is that, I don't know, like when Maidan started and colorful revolutions in the East, social media was supporting democracies. Unfortunately, in last 10 years, we see that autocracies understood how powerful this tool is, and they're unfortunately much more effective than democracies in this direction. So we can see one of the latest is Charlie Kirk assassination. All our three favorite countries like Russia, Iran, and China focus on this topic and created around 11 or 13,000 keywords in their informational space and different narratives on this direction spread it all over the internet. Everybody with their own specification. Russia is saying it's because Ukraine orchestrated it, Iran is saying it's because of Israel, China is just, I don't know, attacking the reputation of United States and saying that it's a country without law and police. This is, for example, nice case of Charlie Kirk. This is fake video. How do I turn it on? This is fake video produced by Russian FSB with our identity that Ukrainian users are posting footage of the shooting. Like we created, United24 created video of Charlie Kirk's assassination with Counter-Strike and music. So this is one of, and they're producing this kind of stuff not like with all big media outlets. And my, I suppose, last slide is that unfortunately and surprisingly, the world is moving toward autocracies, and we can see that the percentage of population living in democratizing countries is twice lower than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and the global trend is pretty sad. And if we all educated and you know, people fighting for the human values, we like the most effective tool for it is producing our strong and effective, truthful narratives. That's also, I wouldn't say like that's what Ivana was speaking about. I don't think we need to produce like Russia and China spreading disinformation and fake news, but we need to focus and flow resources in producing effective, popular content that will unite people, not divide them. I suppose that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for your impressive presentation and for the impressive work that United24 does. United24 is a big media platform, and you mentioned social media. Social media, what can we do about social media? Social media seem to be such a democratic tool, but it turned out that autocracies can turn it against us. І я зараз тому звертаюся до Тетяни Chabaniuk.
And I would like to ask Tetiana Chabaniuk, basically it's very good that we're finalize our event with you, because Molfar Institute is working with the people, is working with the youth, when the well-trained youth, well-trained users of the social networks can make their individual contribution in debunking propaganda, countering psyops, identify some clandestine things. By the way, yesterday there was the first conference on intelligence and OSINT in Ukraine. And Tetiana, what is your Ukrainian experience of countering misinformation? What can we do? I mean, we're hearing that the autocracies are winning. What should the young people do? What should we do in attempt to help? Well, first of all, we have to study what's misinformation and psyops. There's a lot of different channels, training courses where you can get more knowledge. One of the biggest contributions is the reformation of the school course, the defense of Ukraine. The children are going to study, for example, the way the drones work, how to pilot them. So we're living in reality where we need such a knowledge, but another block in this training course is misinformation and how to counter misinformation. Is about security and information security, and Molfar was a part of this reform. We were involved in development of this program. We were providing the materials to the teachers who are going to communicate this information to the children, because we see the Telegram groups emerging online that try to recruit Ukrainian teenagers for some criminal activities in Ukraine in favor of Russia. Also, we've seen that charity foundations which raise a lot of funds to support the armies, such as Come Back Alive, Serhiy Prytula Fund, or United 24. There was a misinformation campaign that no one knows where that money goes, like we're just paying the money for nothing, or we're donating money for nothing. And it turned out that it was an intense PSYOPs campaign to undermine the trust of Ukrainians in those charity funds, to make Ukrainians doubt that they can help their army and invest in fight against the enemy. We had a huge research in this regard. We've identified a lot of bots, and we describe in our study the way those bots work. We also study other narratives. Last year we had a joint investigation with Spilnota Olenivka, civil society organization, about the fakes spread by Russia about Azovstal defenders and Azov Brigade in particular. There's a lot of narratives that the defenders did not walk out, pursuant to the order of their command, but they just surrendered, or they walked out with some pillaged gold. Well, I don't know where they could have taken it in the industrial wars, but we keep track of Russian propaganda. We try to unveil the way those algorithms work, and we try to make everybody aware how to identify Russian narratives. Thank you. That's an incredible job you're doing. I really want to thank you for touching upon the education topic, not education for the children, but for the adults, but also for the children. But I mean, if the children are well educated, they are going to have a good outlook, a good perspective of the world, and hopefully in future we will be able to win this war against autocracies. I want to thank all of the speakers. Well, for what I understand, the translation should be soon over. However, I don't know if we have time for questions and answers, so I apologize. Our broadcast is over. However, the speakers are still in the studio if the audience has any questions, because we have the experts on misinformation among our audience who have their perspective, and we kindly invite you to discussion. Thanks, everyone.